G'day, Shane Dowling here from the website kangaroocourtofaustralia.com. And I'm with Kym Staton, the writer and director of the new documentary, The Trust Fall, Julian Assange. And so thanks for joining me, Kym.
My pleasure, Shane. Thanks for having me on.
Yep. So we'll just go through some of the basic details of the documentary, a little bit about it, then we'll play the trailer, then I'll ask you some questions at the end of it, and also we'll get an update of where Julian Assange is currently at with a High Court judgment in London overnight. Now, can you tell me the basics of the documentary?
Sure. The film aims to really summarise the whole debacle, this whole shocking persecution of an Australian journalist by the US government and its allies, the UK, Australia, Sweden, even Ecuador has been involved. The purpose of it is to expose this shocking treatment, to talk about the wider issues that affect all of us around free speech and press freedom, our ability to question our governments and our ability to access truthful information, the achievements of WikiLeaks. It reveals a never-seen-before interview with one of the child victims of the collateral murder incident in New Baghdad, Iraq during the Iraq War. And it's also fully in support of Assange because my understanding of this issue after years of research is that Julian is a victim of persecution. His human rights have been transgressed in many ways. And it's really a case of oppression. And I believe that when there's someone being bullied, that we shouldn't just stand and watch, and we shouldn't give each side some equal opportunity to say something when one of the sides is doing something incredibly deeply wrong.
Yep. So just tell me quickly, now there's a website set up, the trustfall.org. It's got all the details. You can put your locality in the search box and it'll tell you where it's playing. For example, I put in the Gold Coast and it's playing at the Hota Cinema on Saturday, the 25th of May. When did you first release it and where's it been released? And is that the basics of it? If people want to watch it, they can go to your website, thetrustfall.org, and put in their locality to find out where it's been played?
Yeah, it's been out in cinemas in Australia, New Zealand, the UK. The cinema release started in Australia on the 20th of December. So coming up to 5 months, it's been out in cinemas. We've had the Major Change Event Village and Hoyts have given it a bit of a run, and around 100 other independent cinemas around Australia, all over Australia. Some cinemas have done dozens of sessions, other ones just a couple of sessions. All up, we've had something like 2,000 sessions across Australia, UK, New Zealand.
So we'll watch the trailer now. I watched the video last night, or the documentary last night. So we'll cut to the trailer now for people who haven't seen it.
This is generally the view of people. Oh, we don't know much about Assange. But you should know, because whether you know it or not, he is fighting for you.
For your courage and leadership and tenacity in journalism and publishing.
Since 2010, Assange has been held in progressively narrower, darker, colder, and crueler spaces.
He has been detained since the 7th of December 2010 in one form or another.
And we are now here after years of imprisonment.
WikiLeaks is a non-state hostile intelligence service.
I think the man is a high-tech terrorist.
A high-tech terrorist.
A traitor, a treasonous.
He has to answer for what he has done.
Assange faces up to 175 years in prison for publishing classified documents exposing U.S. war crimes.
The U.S. government narrative about Julian is a complete fraud. It is a complete fraud from A to Z.
Julian took on the most powerful countries in the world, basically all of them.
We now have confirmed that there were plans to kidnap Julian here in the center of London, or even assassinate him.
No one
who instigated that illegal and immoral war has been brought to justice. But the great truth teller sits behind bars.
If wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth.
Julian Assange is a hero.
What if everything we thought we knew about somebody was a lie? Would we be willing to go on a new journey of understanding? This is a story of deception, lies, bravery, and a man who risked everything to bring the truth to light.
Mr. Assange shows all the symptoms that are typical for a person that has been exposed to psychological torture over a prolonged period of time.
He looked at me intensely and said, "I hate to say this." He then hesitated, visibly troubled and searching for words. And then he finally said, "Please, save my life."
May future generations have the ability to speak without restraint. May our children and their children know truth and have access to information that leads to justice. Wherever Julian goes, free speech goes with him.
If there is a bird that is about to take flight, stretch her wings and rule the skies, may it be a peace dove and no longer a bald eagle.
If you think Assange is a traitor, he's a rapist, he's a narcissist, he's a hacker, I don't blame you because you have been deceived. And if you think you've not been deceived, that's normal because otherwise it wouldn't be deception.
Now, we just played the trailer, and like I said at the beginning, you can go onto the trustfall.org website and you can put in your location and it'll tell you where the cinemas are, where you can go watch it. Now, I watched it last night and I had a few questions for you, Kym, in relation to some of the things I've seen in the video. Well, documentary, I mean. Keep on calling it a video, call everything a video nowadays. Jennifer Robinson was in there, and I don't know if she said it recently that, you know, she's talking about the support she's getting from the Australian government. But within the documentary, there was people questioning Anthony Albanese's commitment to getting Julian Assange out, which I've questioned it for a long time as well. Like a lot of people, that they aren't really committed. They're, you know, weasel words of support for Julian Assange. But Jennifer Robinson, in the last sort of week, I've noticed, is talking about how they've got the government support. Have you noticed a change there, or is there a change that you know about? Or
I don't think there's been any change. I think that the Australian government is essentially wholly and fully committed to doing pretty much nothing on this, as much as you say, Albanese using weasel words. I think he's done a merry dance along the fence, trying to pacify the Assange supporters, give them a sense of sort of false hope that he's going to actually do something. But at the same time, not getting his, US puppet masters kind of aggravated by his comments and by his stance. And, you know, prior to getting into power, he was quoted in a backroom meeting as saying, enough is enough, this should be brought to a conclusion. I don't see the point of this going on. It sounded like a down-to-earth, fairly, somewhat supportive statement. And then it took a good 6 months or so before once he was Prime Minister, to then reiterate that, even though people kept asking him, journalists kept asking that question. It took a long time, and then when he finally came out in Parliament, and you'll see that clip in the film where he says, I said some time ago, enough is enough. And then he says, having said that, I don't show any sympathy for some of the actions of Assange, which is a appalling thing to say for somebody that's been detained in one form or another for 14 years. But look, it was significant historically in Australian politics because every Prime Minister since Julia Gillard has just been lock in step with the US and doing whatever they say in regards to Assange, no kind of hesitation or disagreement or protest or debate on the topic. And, you know, even Gillard, I believe, made moves to cancel his passport, you know. And so you've had Prime Minister after Prime Minister, Morrison and everyone else, just basically following along with the US, as if Australia is another state of America. Then when Albanese came along and did this statement, enough is enough, this should be brought to conclusion, of course, all the supporters got really excited. Wow, this is a development. This sounds positive. But I was always a bit dubious. I'm like, let's keep in mind he's a politician, and these words are very ambiguous. What does enough is enough mean? Does that mean, and I never liked that phrase anyway, and he's kept saying it over and over like a broken record. Like I think I've heard him say it about a dozen times now. I don't know why politicians think it's okay to just have a mantra that they just repeat over and over. Are we that stupid? But look, enough is enough. It always sounded inappropriate, because what's enough? Like, you know, is it enough for someone to be 6 3/4 years in 2 rooms in the Ecuadorian embassy while they plotted to assassinate him? Is it enough for him to be carried off to Belmarsh prison in a 6-meter square cell for, you know, at the time that he said that, he'd been in there for 4 years, and he's a journalist and he's not committed any legitimate crime? What's enough? What do you mean by enough is enough? It's a colloquialism. It sounds very slang. It sounds like, you know, something Aussies say, you know, when someone's playing, you know, a play fight in a schoolyard. Enough is enough. But this is somebody's life. This is, you know, 1/3 of his adult life. Assange has spent 1/3 of his adult life in detainment. So it didn't seem like an appropriate statement. Anyway, he's just repeated that for, it must be over a year now. The same thing, even Penny Wong says it. I had a meeting with Justine Elliott the other day, and she said it. They keep repeating this stuff. The only small change I've seen is when Joe Biden, around a month ago, said, a reporter asked him, you know, he's out walking around, and he asked him, you know, what are you doing in regards to Australian government's calls to free Assange? And he said, we're considering it, you know. And so he gave this throwaway statement, and then on that same day, Albanese in an interview said, you know, he added one more thing, which was enough is enough, brought to a conclusion, bring him home, which is sort of sounds like he's slowly adding to this list of his little song line there, but still, it's short of calling for his immediate freedom. That's what the most basic thing that any decent, feeling, thoughtful human should be doing, is saying this guy should have been freed. Should have never been in jail in the first place. He must be freed immediately, and that's what he should be calling for.
Yeah, you had David McBride comment on that question, like that issue in the video, in the documentary, I mean. Now, David McBride, war crimes whistleblower, he's now in jail. So, I don't know, you interviewed him last year, did you?
David McBride is someone else that everyone in Australia and anywhere should know about, because he is a whistleblower, I guess the first whistleblower in this country. Assange is not a whistleblower, he's a publisher, journalist. McBride is a genuine whistleblower. He was working in the Australian Army during the Afghan war as a lawyer in the Army. He witnessed war crimes, revealed these documents, put them in his backpack, took them home, and eventually passed them to Australian media. I believe it was Four Corners. And that went out, and that, you know, some of that footage is absolutely shocking, what he revealed. No crimes of his own. He's revealing other people's crimes. And the first person to be put in jail in relation to these war crimes that occurred in Afghanistan is the whistleblower, the messenger. So they've literally put the whistleblower into prison, up to, it could be a 6-year sentence roundabout, and he'll have no opportunity for parole for about 2 years. It's disgraceful. This is absolutely disgraceful. This stuff only continues because we have a government that is inactive, that's gutless, and you have a people that have no awareness, that don't know what's going on.
I thought it was just ironic that he was in the video commenting on the Prime Minister's attitude towards Julian Assange. Now he's in jail. It
when I chose
home when you see him. If you had to watch the documentary a month ago, well, David McBride's another whistleblower just commenting on the documentary, but now he's actually in jail. So
yeah, well, when I was planning out this film, I knew that I wanted to have a chapter about whistleblowers because we were going to interview the legendary Pentagon Papers Vietnam War whistleblower Daniel Ellsberg, and we managed to interview him before he passed away. I wanted to have examples of whistleblowers because most people that watch this film may not know what a whistleblower is, and we have to define it for them. And then Ellsberg's case ties in very closely. It's very relevant to Assange because they're both, Ellsberg was tried under the same 1917 Espionage Act that Assange is, although on one hand, Ellsberg is a whistleblower, Assange is a publisher, journalist. And then to have David McBride being an Australian whistleblower who at the time was going through the court process, and I knew, my gut feeling was that, that's going to come to some sort of unsatisfactory end with McBride. And so by having him amongst so many whistleblowers that we could have had, to have McBride in the film was, I thought it was a really good idea because we could raise some awareness for McBride at the same time as for Assange, knowing what was up ahead for McBride.
Now, overnight in London, Julian Assange has had a bit of a win. I wouldn't say it's a huge win at this point. You've got to be conservative because he's had a lot of disappointments. He originally won his freedom, but then there was appealed. And so he wasn't granted appeal bail either. So I thought he would have been granted appeal bail, but he never was. So I think we should be conservative moving forward. Otherwise, you get your hopes up. But he had a pretty big win, really, when you look at it. And I'm just going to read it out because Kristen Hafninson, who's a WikiLeaks editor-in-chief, he made this key point that they're sort of boxed in the US. Now, the reason he had a win is because they wouldn't give a guarantee, or they only used weasel words to give a guarantee that Julian Assange would be guaranteed freedom of speech protections, which all the US citizens have. They wouldn't guarantee that he would be allowed that, which meant he was going to potentially be prejudiced at the trial in the US if he's extradited because of his nationality. That's the way I understood it. Because he's an Australian, he's not entitled to what the American citizens are, which is First Amendment, which protects free speech. And Kristen Hafninson basically pointed out the reason they won't give him that because they're going to have to admit he's a journalist. And if they admit he's a journalist, well, their whole case falls apart. And if they won't give that, they're not giving the UK courts a guarantee that they've asked for, that they will be protected like all US citizens. How did you interpret that, and what's your viewpoint moving forward?
Yeah, well, it was the outcome that I expected. Following this for some years, I did predict that this is what will be the next step. It just seemed really obvious when you look at the 3-page document, the assurances that the US provided to the UK High Court. The main anomaly there was that they said that Assange could seek to rely upon First Amendment protections. So basically that if he's on trial in the US, he could ask, hey, can I have First Amendment protections, please? I'm not an American citizen, but all of these human rights charters, the European Court of Human Rights and the United Nations declarations protect free speech regardless of frontiers anyway. And, so is he going to get those protections? And all they could say was that he could seek to apply for those. So, it's no guarantee at all. And because of that, it just seemed like that was a loophole that the UK court would use to basically prolong this really long-term court hearing. More than 4 years now that the extradition hearing has been going on. And that's been part of their strategy from the beginning when they were planning to destroy Assange and WikiLeaks, was to make it just drag out, keep him detained and keep him in prison so that he would be out of touch with the world and be out of action, not be able to continue his work, and also to be psychologically tortured and to be to develop health problems. And I think they also were hoping that they would forget the world would forget about Assange. So yeah, I wasn't surprised by it. I don't actually think of it as a win, because I think this was the most convenient outcome strategy at the moment, was to keep him in prison, mainly because you have the US elections coming up in November, and they don't want to have a multi-award winning Australian journalist turn up in America in handcuffs leading up to that election. And if you look at the expected time frame for this full appeal on these grounds to do with free speech protections, discrimination, it's expected to go for about 6 months, and that takes you neatly 2 weeks past the next US elections.
Yeah, it's hard to say what will happen. You just got to play what's in front of them at the time. I had another point I wanted to make and see what you thought about it, because one thing that's probably played into Julian Assange's, played to his advantage, is what's happening in Israel at the moment, because also overnight the International Criminal Court have applied for, or they are seeking arrest warrants for the Israeli leadership and also the Hamas leadership, including the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, some of the politicians around the world have already come out and supported Benjamin Netanyahu, but others are backing off because they know if he was charged, then found guilty, their reputations could go down with him. And at the moment, the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, he's sitting on the fence. It's only been, less than 24 hours since that happened, but he's currently sitting on the fence, and he's getting a bit of pressure today from the opposition to come out and support Israel. That has probably hit home to a lot of world leaders. Hey, if we keep on following the US's support of these various causes, where potentially our reputation and our positions in power are going to go down the drain. And I think a lot of people would be looking at that and looking at Julian Assange. Hey, the UK Prime Minister, for example, would be saying, hey, if we keep on buckling to the US in relation to all these international issues, well, we could go down the drain, our leadership as well. What do you think about that? Do you think that is beneficial to Assange, the fact that world leaders would be starting to question their unconditional support for the US and their various, global, I suppose, issues?
Well, it's all connected, because what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, and the US involvement is largely seems to be motivated by arms dealing, which is, accounts for the reason why in the 347 years that the US has been in existence, they've been at war for 335 years out of that. If I got those figures correct, they're stated in the film. But, there's only been 12 years that the US, in the existence of the US, that they have not been at war. So what people need to understand about the US is, behind these facades of freedom and democracy and spreading democracy around the world, that facade that they put out is this incredibly barbaric arms dealing system, this war system. It was something that Assange has spoken out on many times. There's a terrific speech that we have of him in the film, talking about, you know, where the famous quote comes from: if wars can be started by lies, peace can be started by truth. But after he gave that speech, he also did an interview talking about the Afghan war. And he said that the Afghan war is not about having a successful war. It's about having an endless war, just having a war that will go on and on and on, because the whole aim of it is to take the money out of the taxpayers of the US, wash it through Afghanistan, so wash it through arms sales, and then that money ends up in the hands of a transnational security elite. That's the arms dealing racket. And so, you know, there is this big, brutal beast that's controlling the world. It's the biggest empire that's ever existed in the history of humanity, is the US empire. And they're very good at making themselves out to as a country to be, you know, the source of all freedom and democracy. But there's some big problems. And I'm not anti-American as such. There's some great things about America, some wonderful achievements that they've made, but there's an elephant in the room. And it's not an elephant that's just knocking over a few plates and saucers. It's an elephant that knocks over entire civilizations, entire countries, flattens them literally, and then rebuilds and takes control of all of their assets. So, you know, it all ties in. I do believe if they hadn't undermined WikiLeaks and gone about this highly effective campaign of destroying WikiLeaks, or at least bringing it to its knees where they can not really put out releases and disclosures anymore, and their founder is in prison, unable to continue his mission. If they hadn't done that, you know, I think some of the major problems in the world today would have been avoided, and we would know in advance what was being planned. There'd be a lot more transparency, and, you know, but who knows whether the warmongers, the leaders that would have committed war crimes would have been held to account. All this crazy stuff that's happened over the last few years with no accountability, from, you know, Biden's laptop to Epstein's black book, you know, where we know these things are going on, but nothing happens. Nothing's resolved. No one's held to account. No one's held to account for the war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. And the only people that are being punished are the whistleblowers and the publishers.
Well, I think some people might be held to account in the near future. It'll be interesting over the next few years, because Biden looks like he might be held to account. He's got big problems with his support with Israel, protests everywhere in the US, at least in the universities. And he's obviously changing his tune to some degree because he knows he's losing support. And then you got people who are supporting Netanyahu, like the Australian Prime Minister. He's backpedaling today. Whether he stays in that position, he'll probably change his position 4 or 5 times over the next week. Who knows? And they're starting to lose power too, because next federal election will probably go to a minority government, or go very close to it, if not a minority government. So those people in power are starting to lose power. Although one point I should point out that really plays into exactly what you said is AUKUS, just a big military machine where I'm about to do some videos and that on it. The Australian government now, both sides are like a duopoly supporting AUKUS, and they're all jumping on board the bandwagon after they leave politics to make money from it. So that's exactly what you're talking about, the big war machine. Australia's heading down that path, and the sooner we go to a minority government, the better. Hopefully that might help put a stop to it, but maybe it won't, who knows. But I just want to finish off in relation to the documentary. You also had Tariq Ali in there. I found him fairly interesting and very knowledgeable. The parts you had in relation to him on there, commenting on various issues. Can you talk more about his background and who he is? Because he'll be new to most Australian viewers.
Yeah, Tariq Ali is a UK historian, author. I haven't yet read any of his books, but I look forward to doing so. Although, actually, I have read one of them. At least he was the editor on a book to do with Assange. I don't remember the title, but it was a whole collection of writers, and he edited it. And that's how he caught my attention, because he's been involved with the Assange case for years and years, and so articulate, just a brilliant speaker and a brilliant thinker. And that he's just one of the most wonderful intellectuals in the UK, and it was just such an honor to have him in the film. The funny thing about that interview, it was over Skype. I wasn't able to travel because of the lockdowns at the time, and so we did it over Skype, and the connection wasn't very good, and so I could barely hear his responses. I kept going. I had a videographer there in his living room filming him, and it wasn't until I watched it back, because then I could watch the actual footage we collected, and I just discovered, wow, so many of these statements are going to end up in the film. He's so insightful, and he's also very charismatic. So yeah, brilliant to have Tariq Ali in the film. I think the line that I really appreciated the most, and also his mannerisms as well. He's so animated, but he said what the authorities do is they treat us like children. They do their misdeeds, they commit their crimes, but never in front of the children. Don't let the children find out what we're really doing. It's just so down to earth, And we wanted to make a film that was not stuffy, cold, dry political documentary. I wanted to make a film that was relatable to everyday people, to the working class, to people that don't watch political documentaries. And people like Tariq Ali are very skilled at coming across and making things simple to understand, things that are quite complicated, breaking them down into easy to understand concepts. And so yeah, and I think the caliber, the quality of the interviewees in the Trust Fall is another testament to the achievements of Assange, because he's got all of these friends and supporters who are so intelligent and so brilliant, and we were just sport for choice for being able to have 24 of them in the film to share all of these important insights.
Yep, and we're running out of time, so I'll just finish up fairly quickly. Just want to ask you, you seem to be the go-to guy now. I noticed a video on Channel 9 from this morning, I think it was. You did an interview with the Today Show. So you're the
Well, I wouldn't say I'm the go-to guy. I'm probably just a fallback if his family and Jennifer Robinson and others are preoccupied in London. But always happy to advocate for Julian anytime I'm asked to speak.
Yep. So I watched the documentary last night. Like I said, I probably on average probably know more than most about Julian Assange, although I'm not an expert, but I follow him probably closer than most people do. I have a personal interest, and I certainly learnt from watching the documentary. I learnt stuff, and it was good to see people there I hadn't seen before and get their viewpoint. So it's well worth watching. And like I said earlier, you can go to the website, thetrustfall.org, and you can put in your location and find out where you can watch the documentary. Like I said at the beginning, it's at the Hoda Gold Coast on Saturday the 25th of May. So if you're on the Gold Coast, you can go watch it there. Kym, have you got anything else you'd like to say at the end? Otherwise, we'll get going.
Yeah, well, look, thanks so much for getting into this issue and giving the film some coverage. I really appreciate your time interviewing me today and also watching the film. And I just want to urge, the decent people of Australia, the people that are willing to question the narrative and are curious about what's going on, come along and see this film, because it's not only about the life of a man, one very courageous, very brilliant man, a man that should be a national treasure. Maybe he should be the next Prime Minister of Australia. We definitely need more truth and transparency in government. But it's not just about him, it's about us. When people understand how the destiny of Julian connects to all of our rights, wherever Julian goes, free speech goes with him. If people understand that, then we'll be horrified, and we'll be really in a hurry to lend a hand and do something about this to fix it.
Yep. On that, thank you for your time there, Kym.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.